very important: its independence. The Ombudsman has made me aware that this meeting is timely and that she has just received notice that the Cayman Islands Office of the Ombudsman will be reassessed for its membership in the Ombudsman Association in May 2025. The review is done every 4 to 5 years, and each member has to convincingly prove that it meets the strict criteria for membership. The most fundamental of these is to be visibly and demonstratively independent from those the Ombudsman has the power to investigate. Sometimes we believe because Cayman is small, we aren't subject to the scrutiny of external watchdogs on matters of accountability, transparency, and fairness. However, the Office of the Ombudsman most certainly is. Its membership in Ombudsman associations globally requires it. They in turn are subject to the scrutiny of powerhouses like the United Nations High Commission to ensure that every person has access to justice via the complaints process as a fundamental human right. The importance of the need for independence is to allow those who seek to complain against their government to be able to freely do so through a confidential and impartial process without fear of undue influence or prejudice in the decision-making. This is a valuable service to the Cayman public, and this independence must be safeguarded by each one of us at all costs. On a local level, without the Ombudsman as a watchdog for its citizens, the values which have established our parliamentary democracy, values such as accountability, values such as transparency, could give way to corruption and prejudice against citizens. On a global level, we could be shamed on an international stage as a country that does not respect nor uphold the rule of law. It would diminish the reputation that we have built so hard, that we have built off the backs of our forefathers, a reputation of fairness and integrity in our system of governance for over 165 years. With that said, it brings me no joy to report that notwithstanding Section 120, Clause 6 of the Constitution, which provides that the Ombudsman shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority, the Ombudsman has been subject to interference by others, and if it were not for the strong moral compass and backbone of the Ombudsman, the independence of this office may have been diminished with the resulting loss of trust by the public. That would make it an office in name only, and we already have enough of those in this country. A waste of public funds, and worse, the creep or perhaps the leap of corruption. May I say, therefore, that not only is this office punching above its weight in the work it produces, it does it with the utmost integrity, which, based on increasing number of complaints coming through its doors, it is a testament to the public trust in this office. And as you will see from the annual report from the Office of the Ombudsman, the office responded to just under 500 inquiries during 2023. This is a 50% increase in complaints received over the previous year, and for 2024 it has increased again. It is incumbent on all of us not to breach that public trust, so that this avenue of justice, which is free of charge, by the way, is always accessible to the people of this country to hold their government and the civil servants to account via the complaints process, and to have confidence the investigation of their matter will be done fairly, confidentially, impartially, and without fear of political and other interference. It is a criteria by which this office will be judged in a few months. And it is even more important to realize that this office has performed short-staffed and in conditions that are not good to their health, which when the committee members start to ask these questions, I'm sure they will be answered honestly. I'd also like to say a special thank you to Tichelle McLean, sitting next to me, who has taken over from Laura. Sarah? Susan, sorry. It's from Susan Burke, and has done a very good job of trying to keep us online, getting everything in order. Thank you very much, Tichelle. And to the Ombudsman, thank you very much for everything, and for always being openly honest with the board members. And I'd like to also offer apologies for Mr. Joey Hugh, who's not here today, but to also pay homage to Mr. Christopher Saunders and Mr. J.E. Banks, who has not missed one meeting for the 4 years we have been here. Thank you all very much for your support and your guidance with this office. Madam Ombudswoman, or just Ombudsman, you know the joke we have. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for coming and bringing your staff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, that very concise and relevant introduction to the work of our office and to the importance of our office in this parliamentary system of democracy and good governance. I'd just like to extend a warm welcome to you, Mr. Chairman, to the honourable members of the Oversight Committee, Mr. Saunders and Mr. Ebanks, to Ms. Tichelle, who, as Mr. Chairman has pointed out, is new, but she's learned very quickly. I wish I could say the same. I'd like to also extend a very warm welcome to everyone who is watching on the CIG TV on Facebook or on YouTube, or listening on Radio Cayman 89.9 FM. Lastly, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of my staff, who I thought it was appropriate to have to join me here today. I feel that it's important. They're the unsung heroes of our office. They never really get the recognition that they deserve. And so I wanted them to be present with me here today, because all of us collectively are the Ombudsman. It's more than just me. And it's because of the good work that they do that our office is able to serve the public with integrity at a very high level. And I also think it's important because there's been recent social media to the effect that we contract this work out to people in the UK, and nothing could be further from the truth. All of the work that we do is done right here by all of these wonderful staff members that I am very blessed to serve. I can tell you wholeheartedly, they serve with integrity, they serve with vast knowledge and skills, and because we are a service entity, they serve with utmost passion as well. So I just thank you for indulging us and allowing our entire staff to attend this auspicious meeting. It is the first. I hope it's not the last. And because it is the first, it's a very steep learning curve, so bear with me. But I will endeavor to go through the 2023 annual report. And I'd just like to say, for the benefit of some of those in the media, the timing of this report is not our fault in being delayed. It is just the way the statutory obligations work for filing annual reports. So we're in the process of finalizing the 2024 report, which will be tabled in Parliament in March or April of this year. And hopefully, to keep things more relevant, I'll be able to touch on some of the work beyond 2023, but this particular meeting focuses on the 2023 annual report. Before I get into the report, however, though, and for the benefit of anyone who may not know what the Ombudsman is and who may not understand the type of work our office does, with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, I would like to just provide a very brief overview. The role of an ombudsman, and I'd just like to say that that word is gender neutral, just like Cayman is gender neutral. So there is no ombudswoman or ombudsperson. Sometimes it's used in plural as ombudsman, but it is a English translation from a Swedish word, which essentially means someone to be an advocate for the common man against its government. So that's the traditional foundation of an ombudsman. And the work of an ombudsman traditionally is to assist lay people, the public at large, in bringing complaints against their government. So people who may not have access to the court have an avenue of justice through the Office of the Ombudsman that hears complaints by the public against their government in an impartial, transparent, and accountable way. We don't take sides, we hear evidence from both sides, and then we make a ruling. So that's the traditional work, and it's called maladministration. For our office, it runs the gamut, and maladministration generally runs the gamut from time delays to abuses of government power. There is no one who is above the law, and our office is charged with investigating any form of maladministration. So it provides a valuable service to the public. And just to touch on maladministration, the maladministration investigations have a dual benefit, both to the complainant, because they have a right of justice, free of charge, with very qualified investigators reviewing their matters and ruling on them. But the other benefit is to the government entity against which the complaint is made, because it gives the government an opportunity to correct its wrongs, to maybe do things better. And so the purpose of maladministration complaints is not to necessarily whack a government entity over the head for doing wrong. It is really geared to having that government entity serve the Caymanian people better by putting better measures in place to avoid issues arising, such as the one the complaint brought. So in addition to maladministration, though, this office is quite unique amongst ombudsman offices generally, because we are the umbrella organization for two different divisions: the complaints division, which hears maladministration complaints against the police by the public, and whistleblower complaints, which also applies to the private sector. It's not just a public sector complaints process. And the other division is information rights. So we are the data protection regulator for the Cayman Islands, and we're also the appellate body for freedom of information appeals. So we are, on the one hand, the maladministration takes a more conciliatory approach, and on the other side, we have more functions that are more typical of a type of court. So we are a quasi-judicial. We do provide a quasi-judicial function in that respect. We provide an alternative system of justice for the people of the Cayman Islands. We do that for under five distinct areas of law: the Police Complaints by the Public Act, the Whistleblower Protection Act, the Freedom of Information Act, the Data Protection Act, the Complaints Maladministration Act, and then we're also governed by the Ombudsman Act, and most importantly, we are bound by the Cayman Islands Constitution, which gives our office its dependence from all of government. We are, in a nutshell, the government watchdog. In carrying out the functions for which we have jurisdiction, the Ombudsman has wide powers. We have powers equivalent to a Grand Court judge to summons witnesses and the production of documents. We have powers equivalent to a chief inspector for investigating complaints made against the police. We have power to make binding decisions in certain matters, and the power to impose monetary penalties for data breaches up to a sum of CI $250,000. So our function is quite important. I think it's very important that we are taken seriously, because the law provides us with these functions, and I can tell you we are all committed to upholding the law and applying it fairly and squarely. We don't make exceptions. We're not politically influenced, and our independence established in the Constitution requires us to defend that independence vigorously. So in summary, the Ombudsman provides a valuable service in ensuring that every person has access to justice, free of charge, high-quality advice, in a fair and transparent process. It promotes government accountability and transparency while providing citizens with the protections they deserve to seek justice against wrongdoing by their government, by the police, and under the Data Protection Act and the Police Complaints by the Public Act. These also apply to the private sector. Now turning to the 2023 annual report, You will note, Mr. Chairman, that it's comprised of...
Mr. Chairman, through you, before we get into the 23 report, just for the historical nature of this meeting, can we have your members that are present here enter the name for the record, so at least it's recorded forever and a day in the answers of Parliament as you go around before we get into the 23 report, if that's okay with you?
Thank you.
Since this is the very first meeting, thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I'll start with my deputy for complaints, Mr. Well, you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Alan Slater, and I'm the Deputy Ombudsman for... Oh, sorry. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alan Slater. I'm the Deputy Ombudsman for the complaints side of the division. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Diana Sipos. I'm the Deputy Ombudsman on the information rights side.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Anita Wells, and I'm the Senior HR Manager and Office Manager for the Ombudsman's Office.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Brent Fuller, Investigator, Complaints.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Julia Vassell. I am Analyst, Information Rights for the Office of the Ombudsman.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I am Charlene Roberts, Senior Appeals and Policy Analyst for the Ombudsman Office.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Shanique Frederick. I'm an Information Rights Analyst with the Office of the Ombudsman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mr. Andy White. I am an analyst at the Office of the Ombudsman.
Could those staff in the back also please find yourself to a mic nearby and give your name, your position, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Alicia Parker. I'm the Case Management and Accounts Officer.
Good morning. Through you, Mr. Chairman, Shari Welcome, Analyst for Information Rights.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name is Andrea Christian, and I'm an investigator with the Office of the Ombudsman and the Complaints Division.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Enya Parchman, and I'm an analyst for the Information Rights at the Ombudsman's Office.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kathy Gonzalez, investigator for the complaints side.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Derry Hill, and I'm an investigator for the police complaints side.
Thank you all very much.
No, thank you very much for addressing that, Mr. Saunders. So I will try to be brief because I'm sure there'll be some questions that arise, in relation to the report and generally. So without further ado, I will jump right in. You'll note, Mr. Chairman, that the annual report for 2023 is comprised of an overview of the work of the office, which includes human resources, and then it provides case summaries for each of our distinct areas of work across the two divisions, information rights and complaints. Those case summaries are quite extensive, so I don't intend to speak to any of those, but if you have any questions or if there's any of those that are of any interest to the members, then I'd be happy to answer to them. I'll just read so that I don't go off script what my message is actually in the 2023 report, and this has been tabled and is available on our website as well. So I'll begin with a quote from Mr. Will White, who says, quote, "The reward for work well done is more work." And I can tell you that has proven to be very true in terms of our office. Mr. Chairman, you had alluded earlier to the fact that we have increased our work twofold over the period of 2023, which was just 6 years into our the establishment of our office. So 2023 also marked the first full year of my administration at the office. In reviewing this year, the 2023 year, and despite our daily operational challenges and some lingering struggles with staffing issues at the time, I can't help but consider that the above quote was positively in our own context. It really was proven true. I can't thank these dedicated members of staff enough for the hard work that they put in. I mean, we burned the candle, the midnight oil on multiple occasions, and they just selflessly rolled up their sleeves and got the work done. I don't think we missed any of our deadlines. If we did, it wasn't by very much. So I want to publicly thank our staff for all of those efforts during 2023, and I'm happy that that dedication continues now. The results of the 2023, in the 2023 annual report is a testament to the confidence the Caymanian public has in our work. The proof that we're receiving more of it than in any year since opening in September 2017 speaks to that. In each of our 5 service areas, the number of cases received as well as the number of cases resolved increased. The sheer volume of complaints and breach reports is worth noting. So for instance, the number of data protection breach reports received went from 90 in 2022 to 178 during 2023. Even more impressive, the number of data breach cases resolved went from 65 in 2022 to 152 last year. Well, not last year, sorry, 2023. It was a record number for our office and a tribute to the hard work of the information rights team. Meanwhile, on the freedom of information appeal side, in 2023, we were in our 15th year since that legislation had commenced. Our office received over 30 appeals in 2023, and which is a small increase over 2022, but I want to highlight the fact that those are very time-consuming types of investigations, because in a way of trying to be fair, we have to give everybody an opportunity to present more, more information, and so the relatively small number does not speak well enough to the actual amount of work that goes into those appeals processes. The number of complaints received and resolved by the complaints team also went up substantially in maladministration, complaints against the government, and police complaints made by the public. Maladministration investigators resolved 100 cases in 2023, which is a number that our office had never seen before. And I want to highlight that number of cases resolved was completed by 2 staff members, one of whom was training. So Mr. Brent Fuller took the lead, and Ms. Andrea Christian was our trainee investigator at the time. And I just want to highlight the fact that that's an incredible number of cases to investigate and resolve by just 2 individuals. And likewise, on the police complaints team, we resolved nearly 40 matters, again, a significant increase over 2022, achieved in the context of increasingly complex and detailed work, and often involving other agencies for criminal referrals. Again, that work was done by only 2 investigators, Mr. Slater and Ms. Derry Hill. Mr. Slater was the senior, and Ms. Derry Hill was actually the trainee. So in terms of police complaints, they are, as you can imagine, a bit different than our usual complaints investigations process. They tend to be more technical. We can do criminal referrals to the ODPP, and so it's a different type of investigative work and highly complex. On the whistleblower side, as you can imagine, it's quite a sensitive area. We don't tend to publish information on whistleblower matters simply because we guard the identities of whistleblowers very strictly, and we keep that information confidential. But for the first time in 2023, we were able to report on some of those cases, obviously where we gave nothing away, but we thought it was important that the public sees the work that we do in that area of our jurisdiction as well. excuse me, significant investigation work and supervision conducted by both our police investigators and data protection analysts, along with our partners in other government agencies, resulted in some high-profile criminal investigations being brought before the courts in 2023. This type of interagency relationship had not previously been tested to this extent in our history, and whilst the outcome of some of these matters is still pending, we are proud of the role we have played in getting these matters before the courts. These cases serve as examples of the expanding role of our office in its demands for services, and to highlight again, it goes beyond the classic ombudsman duties of resolving complaints against government. This report also provides the opportunity to address an issue which has been raised in public forums, and it's around the issue of public reporting by the Office of the Ombudsman. I kind of alluded to this when I began by saying we're bound by statute to not be able to publish annual reports as timely as we would like. And so there is a lag between when we report and where we are currently. Our office has a public reporting function to Parliament, and the Parliamentary Oversight Committee, you esteemed members and chairman, are responsible for that. We table both our annual reports, like this one, and own motion investigations in Parliament prior to their public release. However, even when these reports are released, we must protect the identity of complainants as well as the personal data of those who may be included, which provides a bit of a challenge to us. We appreciate the need to promote our important work, particularly on matters of public interest, but we must also be mindful of not breaching the confidentiality and the confidence our office has sought to earn and maintain with the Cayman Islands public. It's a delicate balance, and we struggle to get it right every day. But in conclusion, I would just like to say that I really appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, and the members who saw fit to allow us to have this meeting publicly. We tend to have it in camera, in a boardroom kind of fashion, where the public, apart from getting to see our actual report online or on our Ombudsman website, never really get to hear about the important work that we do. And so this provides us with a great opportunity to, first of all, make the public aware that we exist and the services that we provide, but also because we are spending the public purse, to give the public an opportunity to see the work that we do and to see how their money is being spent and to hold us accountable for the work we do. And so again, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do this in a public way, and thank you very much for the privilege.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions? Mr. Saunders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank Ms. Sharon and our team for coming down here today, and thank Ms. Sharon for taking the time out to just give us a brief summary of the 2023 report. One of the things I'm curious about, and I noticed on page 21 of the report, when there was a situation where a civil servant claims unlawful access to travel history. In my previous life as a minister, I used to get some of those issues where people with access to information would go in and check to see who's traveling on what flight and which spouse is traveling with which spouse. And for one situation, it did cause problems within a particular family that I'm aware of, where one person now did it. The question is, with all of that, the question is this, through you, Mr. Chairman, is what processes are in place for those to ensure that those civil servants that are charged with confidential information do not actually abuse it? Because I know in some situation, like I said, in one situation, it just so happened where one person went up on Cayman Airways, one person went up on American, and someone was able to put it together. And when he came back from Miami, his clothes was packing outside the door. Yeah. So the question is, what process is in place to make sure that that's not actually abuse?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. We can only investigate complaints that are brought to to our office. We can provide what we call own motion investigations. So for example, if there's a public interest matter that hasn't been the result of a public complaint, I can initiate an investigation into that particular public interest event. And other than that, our work results from complaints that are brought to us. So in these particular circumstances, this would have been a complaint by the public made against the a data breach, or and we've had several. What we are able to do is obviously investigate the matter, and if the investigation results in a decision against the government entity, then we make recommendations for how they can make those amends, and it depends on the case, so everything is on a case-by-case basis. But then we follow up and make sure that those recommendations are being followed, and if they're not followed, then we can bring a special report to Parliament under Section 18 of the, was that the Ombudsman Act? Or the Maladministration? Yeah, so we can bring those reports to Parliament, though, and I guess name and shame the entity that is not complying. And if you would like, Ms. Charlene, you feel comfortable speaking to that particular matter, or Jerry, you feel comfortable? I'll ask Ms. Jerry if she can just give us a brief, because I think it's important. I don't want to lose this opportunity to have the public know what we actually do. So better to hear from the experts than let me try to explain.
Okay, state your name and your position before you start to give the answer.
Jerry Vassal, Analyst, Information Rights. Through you, Mr. Speaker. So first of all, the Data Protection Act places a mandatory compliance component on all organizations, public and private entities that are processing personal data. So once we have received a complaint, our first stance will be to address the data controller or the organization to find out what measures they have in place. Have they done training? Do they have any technical measures in place? How the breach, in fact, did occur? At this point, we can either ascertain if the organization has had reasonable measures in place and the employee did something unauthorized. The law also does allow us to, under Section 54, to, I guess, I'm lost for words, bring charges or refer the matter to the DPP. If we have found that the organization or data controller has not complied with the law and don't have the measures in place, we have the measures to also issue an enforcement order to enforce them to take certain necessary steps to rectify and close those gaps that they may have.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just a general question. Recognizing that government holds a lot of people's personal, private information, and it varies from different government departments and so forth, how comfortable are you, or is there one particular department that you can say is probably the standard bearer in terms of protecting people's personal information? Because in this day and age of identity theft, I mean, and we know of situations where, you know, we have the cyber attacks against the government system and everything else, registrar of companies and everything else. I mean, these things are already reported in the press. Is there, like, a department that you can say, well, you know what, these guys are on it? And I don't want it to get onto the bad department, so I don't want to name and shame anyone at this point. But is there, like, someone that you can say is really doing a good job in terms of protecting people's personal information?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say that the Data Protection Act is relatively new to the Cayman Islands, and the area of data protection is always emerging. We had the GDPR in the UK, then the GDPR for Europe, and then the UK has their own version of that, and Cayman has its own law on that. So I'm not trying to give everyone a free pass. I think the law has been in effect long enough that people should be aware of it and their duty to abide by it. I will say that I think in terms of government, it is still relatively new in that government requires the training. They have the basic data protection training online, but in our experience, there's no accountability. Like, a staff member can say that they did it. I don't think there's a way of measuring or tracking that they actually have done the training. But I would also like to pay tribute to Ms. Aubrey Bodden and Taylor Langfit of the Information Rights Unit at Government. I think that those two ladies, they do a phenomenal job of trying to make sure that government is aware of the Data Protection Act and the Freedom of Information Act and the duties for transparency and duties for data protection. But again, I think it's still relatively new and probably not seen with the importance that it is due. So our job is to try to help promote that awareness. We can promote it through the complaints that we receive and we issue our enforcement orders and that type of thing, but also we try to do, we haven't had the staffing to do it before, but we also have an obligation under the law to provide training, and we have been doing a little bit of that, but not to the extent that we're comfortable because we just have not had the resources. In terms of any one government department that is actually doing a good bang-up job, are we aware of any?
Through you, Mr. Speaker, while I can't say for sure, because one thing we do know is that some matters aren't being reported. So we do have events where things come through us via a complaint from an individual who has been affected, and we found that the breach has not been reported to us. As the Ombudsman, Ms. Sharon, mentioned, it is still fairly new. So some entities don't know the requirement to report to us. But there are a few that I can say we have had a low number of breaches, and they have addressed what's required by them. So it's not to say we haven't had any breaches, meaning that they're setting the standard, but they have recognized that they have had a breach and they have acted accordingly to close and mitigate against those. We do have quite a few, where the numbers are very low.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, through you, and the thing I wanted to get at, I remember there was a media report where someone had made a complaint, I think, where someone was accessing their personal information from the police, and it basically went dead, and then they made a complaint to your office, and then your office did an investigation and found out that there was the personal information. I think, matter of fact, they were getting information from a telecoms provider in terms of their, activities on their phone and so forth. So it goes to show the importance of your office as an avenue for when people needs, I guess, some kind of justice or something else. But one of the things that we're trying to get at, and one of the reasons why we wanted this meeting in the public today, is for the public to understand that, yes, the government have my information, but is it secure? And more importantly, is the people who are supposed to securing it not really abusing it? Now, I say that to say, I know there were some issues in the past where there were complaints against the police that seemed to have fell in, I don't want to use the word purgatory, where your office can only go so far, and then the police can only, I guess, supposed to take a baton from going someplace else. I know we had discussed in terms of trying to find a resolution for that. Have there been any update or any resolution, or are we still in that gray matter between ourselves and the police?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman. So in the first issue that you raised in relation to the data breach with the police, that matter did go to court, and we really thought that there would be a conviction, but when we found out that the person had been acquitted, it really all came down to the fact that the police did not have adequate data protection policies and procedures in place. And that is the role of our office. So when that case was tried and the person was acquitted, we didn't really understand, but we received a subsequent data protection complaint, a data breach. And this is how we discovered that they don't have adequate policies and procedures in place. So it is the role of our office to highlight that and to, like I said before, try to help government and the police do their jobs better. The other matter that you raised is in relation to a conflict, I guess, or a vacuum in the law where the original Police Act allowed for police complaints to be investigated by the police, which didn't create a whole lot of public trust if the police were investigating their own complaints. And so the law took out that provision of the Act and put it into the Police Complaints by the Public Act. But in doing so, it left out the part about how discipline is carried out. So there's no provision for the commissioner to discipline a police officer in a complaint that's made by the public to our office. So we can investigate a complaint. We can find that the police officer, you know, is guilty of misconduct and make recommendations to the commissioner for discipline. Now, discipline is at the discretion of the commissioner, so he can, you know, take a very maybe just a very mild approach, or he can terminate. But his hands are tied because his legislation does not allow him to actually carry out the discipline of a police officer when that complaint has resulted from a member of the public. So it's a very unsatisfactory position, not just for our office and for the complainant, because they can never get closure, but it's also unsatisfactory for the police officer who has this charge against them, so to speak, and they can't be disciplined, so they're kind of held in abeyance. They can't be promoted, they just kind of stuck. So we have made, we've looked at it 7 ways to Sunday to try to find a way. My predecessor actually was trying to close that gap, but they were taking a much longer process in having a commission set up to review the complaints, which never ever happened. It was something that the governor needed to initiate. It just never got its legs under it, and so nothing was ever done. I have worked with several, well, through Mr. Ennis, Anthony Ennis, the Deputy Commissioner of Police, in trying to get it to the legal drafts person to close this gap. The latest that I heard, and that was last year, maybe even longer than that, was that they were looking at completely revamping the Police Act and putting those provisions back in. So the matter is really out of our hands. Our law only allows us to investigate and make recommendations. We have no role to play in the discipline, and so that's a matter that's left for the commissioner.
Mr. Saunders. Mr. Ebanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to go to page 39 on the delayed response and payments for the Minister of Finance, because not only from the Minister of Finance, but I know other finance sections and throughout other departments, seems like this is something that's always coming up. So I just wanted to find out from the Ombudsman if we got a full resolution on that and what was the reason for those delays and stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Eubanks. Through you, Mr. Chairman. I think this preceded my time, so if I can allow, Drew, you want to speak to that? Oh, it's maladministration, sorry. Sorry, if you bear with us, we are so far into 2024 and 2025. Some of this is not really fresh, but Mr. Fuller is just refreshing his memory about it.
No problem. Mr. Chair, while they look over that, would we be able to just move over to page 40 then, the NAU benefits for elderly Caymanians?
Thank you, Mr. Eubanks. Through you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to speak generally to NAU, because since this report, since the 2023 annual report, some of our recommendations were taken on board by the NAU, and as you are aware, there's been a change in the law and change in their processes. So some of these matters now have been either resolved through the change in legislation or because of the recommendations of this office to those processes. Again, this is a matter for the maladministration team, so I will defer to them.
Mr. Chairman, Brent Fuller, investigator, Ombudsman's Office. I believe, Mr. Chairman, through you, what the honorable member from Northside is referring to is the case entitled Delayed Response and Payment Dispute. That was resolved by way of informal resolution. That's a process where we speak to both parties in sort of like akin to a mediation type situation. So there wasn't a formal investigation required for that particular situation because we were able to speak to both parties. After we did that, the matter was resolved to the satisfaction of both the government entity and the complainant. And forgive me, I'm not sure the other matter that the member was asking about.
Mr. Chair, through you, just want to find out, has there been ever a time frame set out in place where there's a certain period where finance needs to be paid over to business owners? Because I've, through some of the other departments, I've heard complaints where people are saying that, you know, they've gone over a month and they haven't been paid for the works that they have they've billed to the government. So I just want to find out if there was ever anything put in place with finance that says, well, you know, people should be paid within 2 weeks or 1 week once their everything has been submitted.
Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Eubanks. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we do these, our recommendations are based on a case-by-case basis, and we tend to try to resolve those informally, as Mr. Fuller had mentioned, because sometimes it's just an oversight and it's very easily resolved. When we go into a formal investigation, there's quite a bit of work, and so we endeavor to informally resolve these kinds of matters. We have had cases where there have been extreme delays, up to 2 years, where payments have not been made. And in those cases, we do end up having to formally investigate. But because we do it on a case-by-case basis, it's hard to say, you know, what recommendations are made because they vary. But I will say that we don't just recommend that they do a certain thing. We give them timelines, and then we monitor and we follow up if need be. And so we keep the pressure on, because, you know, we want results. And again, I think, I mean, it also varies, but the public is, or sorry, the government is also learning more about the type of work that we do by trial and error. I think in the beginning we were seen as the enemy, you know, fear us, don't give them anything. But through experience, they've seen that we take a conciliatory approach. We're not on any party's side. We're impartial. We just want the evidence so that we can make decisions that are fair and that get results. So I think it's a slow process, but with each case that we resolve favorably, government is learning that we are actually a partner to help them provide better services to the public that they serve.
Mr. Eubanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank her for the answer. I'm good right now.
Saunders.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just turn to page 47 of the report. There was, this one dealt with Department of Education Services. And just to the listening public, I just want to indulge so they can understand what the situation was, because this is something that many of us hear on a regular basis. And the complaint goes, a concern was raised regarding the provision of special educational needs, SEN, assistance to 2 children at a local government school. The concern was that the children could not receive the specialized assistance they required at the government school, and an application was made on their behalf seeking alternative education funding so they could attend another school where such additional assistance might be provided. DES did not accept the application for 2 reasons. 1, the children had already been withdrawn from the government school, and 2, the children had not exhausted all of the options available to them at the government school and were so determined to be performing adequately. Well, I won't read out the entire investigation, but what had caught my attention was after was with the statement where the Ombudsman says The Ombudsman did not support the complaint, finding that there had been no unreasonable delay in the consideration of the children's application. She also found that the school and DES had followed applicable regulations and policies in making this decision. However, there were two recommendations made as a result of the findings, and this is where I just want to get get an update on. One, that the Ministry DES obtained a legal opinion regarding whether Caymanian private school students are prevented from or allowed to apply for alternative education funding / placement under current existing laws and regulations. And two, based upon the outcome of that legal advice, the Ministry considered forwarding the complaints application to the AEPP and or the Education Council for consideration. And it goes on to say, our office will continue to monitor the recommendation in relation to this matter. And that is pretty much where the question is. I mean, I realize it was something that was ongoing, but has there been any update or any final solution on that issue? Or final resolution, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Eubanks. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Mr. Fuller to answer your the main part of your question, but I just wanted to also say that the job of the Ombudsman is not to determine whether policies are appropriate to the circumstances, because very often we find that we don't think that they go far enough, and where we can make recommendations that they be improved, we do. In this particular matter, because the government or the DES had followed its own processes, we couldn't find maladministration because the process had not been breached. However, it was a very difficult case, I will say that. I think it took all of our passions and emotions, because it was really a difficult, if you put yourself in the place of that parent that brought the complaint on behalf of the children, it was heart-wrenching. And so we went to great pains to assist and to try to bring about change, not just for those two students, but for all students. And so I'll let Mr. Fuller finish up, because he took the lead on that case.
Mr. Chairman, through you, sometimes you'll see in these reports, and you'll see when you receive the report for 2024, we'll follow up with the recommendations, and we'll provide a report of the recommendations and what has been followed, and if there's any outstanding issues. There will be an update to this case in the 2024 report. If you'll allow me just to consult briefly with the Ombudsman to see if I'm allowed to say anything further. Oh, okay. Yeah. So these matters have been addressed. The legal opinion was produced, and based on the ministry's legal advice, I think the conclusion, if I'm recalling correctly, was that the ministry couldn't forward the complainant's application to the AEPP for various reasons, but that will be included in a more detailed way in the 2024 report.
Thank you very much. Mr. Saunders?
Yeah, sorry, just in the same area, just looking on the issue with the 2-year ban on NAU services. I know that one is a quite lengthy one to read, but I don't know if you can summarize that, because, again, that's an issue that we hear a lot from people where, they basically said that they've been banned or something else. But we do know in many cases that, well, from my own discussion from some time with people, that they do provide false information. And I know there was one issue, or one incident, I think, where someone was sitting like on over $300,000 in a bank account and applied for NAU for assistance. And I mean, while the court was quite lenient and so forth, but we do recognize that these things do happen. And it's kind of difficult when someone is sitting on that kind of money and, reaching out for assistance when there are other people out there who need it and the funds are limited. So just in reference to that one, I mean, it's quite lengthy, but I don't know if you can summarize it. Especially for the listening public.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Through you, Mr. Chairman. This was another difficult case, but it also highlighted that the NAU, and again, I would like to highlight that this was pre the change to the legislation. And so at the time, our office was able to find that there was maladministration, because in this case, there was just a subjective approach taken as to why this particular complainant should be banned from NAU assistance. So Mr. Fuller, I think, was it you or Mr. Fuller also took the lead on that case. I'll let him speak to it. He probably has a better recollection of it than I do.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify, the member is asking for an update on the recommendations again?
Yeah, for the 2-year ban. For the person who was banned
Okay.
for 2 years.
I think it was determined, I'm just refreshing my memory here. Let's see, bother. I think that the 2-year ban was not pursued. I think the recommendation from the Ombudsman was that this was done actually without lawful authority. And so that was, let's see. Yeah, so and then the further recommendation is if she should apply again and act in an untruthful or fraudulent manner, she should be advised of this in writing. And then we looked at further provisions in the NAU's eligibility criteria policy regarding fraudulent cases, and they reworked that section, and then that the NAU eligibility criteria was further amended to indicate what is the criteria for banning clients from services. Those, again, this will probably be updated again in the 2024 report, but those recommendations from the Ombudsman were all followed through to her satisfaction.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Saunders.
Yeah, true, Mr. Chairman. Thank Mr. Fuller much for that answer. I'm always sympathetic to the NAU. I think they're now FAD, the Financial Assistance Department, because they do process a lot, and I know Tamara and her team over there literally does like go above and beyond in terms of helping people. One of the things that I guess we need to, like on the immigration forms, when people are filling out those immigration forms, I think it's immigration, where there is this kind of subject to that where they make a declaration that this is actually truthful and so forth, I guess for fear of whatever. I mean, is that something that they would consider putting on the NAU application forms? I mean, they ask just about everything else in terms of when you're filling out the forms, but where people make that declaration to saying that this is truthful, because in a sense you are asking for assistance using public funds, and as such it comes with a certain amount of responsibility. So the question is, from a recommendation standpoint, should it be something where they make that kind of strong declaration, you know, that basically, I don't want to say like for risk of perjury or whatever, but at least that the information that they're providing is truthful, to avoid some of these issues, because you do have people who game the system, but the vast majority of people, the very vast majority of people, do need the assistance. And because sometimes you're so busy trying to catch those who game the system, it slows down the genuine people who actually need assistance. And we have seen that many times in terms of processing, where they have to go through the checks and balance, even though the situation is right before your eyes where you can directly see it.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Through you, Mr. Chairman, in this particular case, I think it's, I mean, having this lag between reports and when we actually get here to talk about them is a bit of a challenge, because our memories aren't fresh. But as I recall, this particular case, it was a case where it appeared that this individual, this complainant, was gaming the system. And so we were aware of that, but our job is to make sure that there's fairness. And so on the NAU's part, what we found is that they hadn't actually complied with their own standards. So for example, I think there was a provision that said that they may refer the matter to the RSIPs if they find that a person is acting dishonestly. But in this particular case, they said that they would refer the matter to the RSIPs. But then I'm not sure if they did or not. And so part of our recommendation was, if you're going to refer a matter to the police, you need to refer it to the police. Don't make a veiled threat, you know, to a person that you're denying services to. So this one, I think, again, the legislation has probably caught some of the loopholes that we found and some of the recommendations that we have made. Again, it's in the spirit of helping them do their jobs better. So I cannot speak definitively about what is done in terms of disclosures on their form and that type of thing. I'd be happy to follow up with them though, because it's a valid issue. And I would like to say that, and to your point, that NAU is a very, very busy government entity. We find our partnership with them to be very good. We have a good working relationship with them. So yeah, but again, it all comes down to fairness. We don't take sides. So if we find that they're not following the law or following their own processes, then we do call it out. But we do get a lot of good, positive responses from them.
Yes, it doesn't surprise me to hear of the good working relationship with NAU, because memory serving myself and Mr. Saunders right, Miss Tamara Hurlston, you've heard Mr. Saunders sing her praises on many occasions, is a civil servant that came in here and was very honest with us. Yeah, with the Public Accounts Committee. So it doesn't surprise me that she is relationship you have, because she's a very straight up, like what Mr. Saunders said, they've been performing like your office under a lot of pressure and doing a very good job. Mr. Eubanks? Sorry, Mr. Saunders, did you have a follow-up?
Mr. Chair, I have one question. The Ombudsman is appointed by the Governor through a committee, right? Which is comprised of representatives of the Premier, representative of the Leader Opposition, and other prominent persons from the public and private sector. If the Ombudsman had found to be incapable or continue in office, or according to the Constitution, how is the Ombudsman removed? Is it also by the committee?
Thank you, Honourable Eubanks. Through you, Mr. Chairman, no. The short answer is no, and it is an issue which will be considered when we're assessed for membership in one of these global ombudsman associations, because again, in terms of how we treat complainants with fairness and impartiality, transparency, accountability, that is also required in terms of the appointment and the termination of an ombudsman. So there is a process for appointing an ombudsman, but there is no process for terminating an ombudsman. So even under the PSMA, civil servants go through a process for termination. This is one of the things that the Venice Principles, which is from the United Nations, which governs all ombudsman offices, requires that process to be in place.
Madam Ombudsman, when you're answering that, could you also, what are some of the other criteria this office has to meet as part of the review process that's coming up as well? Because I'm figuring, mentioning the Venice report and those things, there's a review process that's coming up down the road as well. Could you also include that in your answer, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So in the Venice Principles at Clause 11, it says the Ombudsman shall be removed from office only according to an exhaustive list of clear and reasonable conditions established by law. These shall relate solely to the essential criteria of incapacity or inability to perform the functions of the office, misbehavior or misconduct, which shall be narrowly interpreted. And I highlighted that word narrowly because that has not been my experience. The parliamentary majority required for removal by Parliament itself or by a court on request of Parliament shall be equal to and preferably higher than the one required for the appointment of the Ombudsman. The procedure for removal shall be public, transparent, and provided for by law. So to respond to your question directly, we do not have that. There is no process for removing the Ombudsman. I mean, the Ombudsman can be terminated, but it would be considered an unfair and procedurally unfair process. Oh, and sorry, Mr. Chairman, to your point about the review, I'll be happy to provide you with a copy of it, but basically these are the terms and rules that govern our membership in the Ombudsman Association, which is actually the organization for all British and Irish ombudsmen across the United Kingdom, British Overseas Territories, and Crown Dependencies. So it has quite a wide membership, but it's specific to the UK. That is the association that we're being reviewed for. And I would say that in the last review, it was under my predecessor, so I wasn't here. I was made aware by the association subsequently that Cayman was not going to receive membership because of the lack of legislative processes to ensure our independence. So they highlighted the fact that Section 6, I think, of the Ombudsman Act does not comply with the Cayman Islands Constitution. So the supreme law of the land is not being followed by the primary legislation governing the Ombudsman. So that is one thing that I fear will, again, be highlighted by this association in their review process, that we have not complied with a revision to the law to make sure that the Ombudsman Act is not, over or requiring for more than the Constitution requires. And there are a couple other legislative amendments that do need to be made in order to protect the independence of this office. And in the Ombudsman Association, as well as the International Ombudsman Institute, which is global, it has over 200 members of 200 member countries represented in that association. At the heart of everything that is required of an ombudsman is the independence. And that's logical, because if we're not independent, then how can the public trust us to come to hear their complaint and investigate it? And so it is something that we guard very fiercely, and we don't fear anybody, because the Constitution has made our office independent. So if that ever changes, then we'll change, but for now, the Constitution requires, and you can look it up, Section 120, subsection 6, says that no one, no person, nor authority shall interfere with the functions of the Ombudsman.
Mr. Saunders?
Mr. Chairman, through you, and I want to thank Mr. Ebanks from Northside for asking that question. And one of the reasons why I'm very happy that we're having this public meeting today, and you and I know from experience where there are other entities in government that are supposed to be looking out for the public. And I can tell you from personal experience that they have a different agenda and they move to the beat of a different drum. And it's refreshing to see that your department, and I know what it is that you have been through personally in terms of standing firm to maintain that independence. Because other departments or other areas that should have been independent are not independent, and I can say that. And if someone wants me to provide proof, I'll provide it too. But one of the things, we talk about Section 120 of the Constitution, that deals with your office. But that also falls under Section 8 of the Constitution. And the headline or the heading for that section is Institutions Supporting Democracy. That is the part of the Constitution that your office falls under. So I'm very happy to see that despite the pressures and despite everything else, that you and your team have stand firm in that regard. And we wanted the public to at least know this and acknowledge the work that your team is doing in terms of maintaining that independence. One of the things, so I just want to thank you for that, because I know it has come at great personal sacrifice to yourself. You know what I mean? And I really just want to thank you publicly on behalf of the people that I represent for the work that you and your team have been doing. I just have like two other areas I just want to touch on before I get into something else. On page 63, the complaint against Cynical, where in this situation where somebody went to the hospital, they were waiting too long in A&E for the emergency, and they went someplace else, and they paid out of pocket, and then they wanted to get reimbursement. But the part in which I'm more interested in is part of the recommendation that says that, they were looking to expand the network for Cynical, which was announced in April 2022. Have there been an update on that, or would that be something that would be in the 2024 report? That goes over to actually page 64. That's the end part of it. that deals with the recommendation of expanding Cineco's network. That's one of the things that we had fought for when we were there to get that done, but I wanted to see what updates they were.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I am going to defer to Mr. Fuller on that one as well, because I recall the matter, but not exactly how it was resolved. But I do believe that well, I'll just turn it over to him.
Mr. Chairman, through you, there will be an update, I believe, on the 2024 report to that, but just to the satisfaction of the member's question, I'm trying to think how to say this. Cineco has done what it can in following this recommendation. Ultimately, and I hope I'm not talking above my head here, but ultimately, these matters of policy decisions regarding implementation of network expansion and these sorts of things are up to the policymakers. So I think what, if I recall correctly, what the Ombudsman decided in this was that Cineco had done its job. That's who we're looking at. That's who the complaint is against. They forwarded their recommendations for the proposal for the policy to the policymakers. And then it's up to the policymakers to decide what they're going to do.
True, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mr. Fuller for that diplomatic response, but I will say this much. Michael Gale and his team over at Cineco, Dan and company, do an excellent job in terms of responding to the public. I think, at least I will go on record to say that's probably one of the best run organizations or one of the best run boards. I think in all of government, it definitely would be ranked up there. And I can say that without very few people being able to contradict. But I do understand their limitations because they have made several recommendations that ultimately has to be done by the policymakers. So they have done their part. And I think it's important for the public to recognize that Cineco is also limited in the sense of it has to take directions from a different group of people. And that requires a certain amount of political will. So from that standpoint, I just wanted to know I'm very happy with Cineco, the work that they're doing, and I can tell you, I need to give Mr. Gilbert McLean his props. 20 odd years ago, or just over 20 years ago, when he was creating it, it was a problem, and if it wasn't for Cineco today, many Caymanians and many people would have no insurance. So I really want to thank Gilbert McLean particularly because he paid a dear political price for creating that institution. And today, history have proven him right in that regard, so I want the record to reflect that. And it's something I've said publicly, but yeah, I do recognize that they are limited, subject to the political policymakers. And the last one in that area that I had was on the one on page 62, going over to page 63, that deals with LPP. Now, I recognize this issue because I've had several constituents where I had to deal with this issue. In yesteryears gone by, when you were doing large developments, the land for public purpose was left in the developer's name. Now they actually designated as LPP, so it goes into, I think, it is not in the developer's name in a nutshell. But for the historical legacy ones, but they put a designation LPP. Yeah, but yeah, they have it. Yeah, sorry, thank you. It's good to have the minister beside me. So in years gone by, it was just left in the developer's name. Now it's left in the developer's name with the designation LPP beside it. But for those that did not have the LPP designation beside it, where people have, passed it on in their will to other people as if though they can go and do this land, and I know people have gone to the bank and tried to get charges on the property and borrow money against the property only to find that they can't do that. You know what I mean? But the question is, I noticed the end note was that you guys will continue to monitor. I don't know if there's been any update on that one since, or is a situation where there's an exercise being undertaken to go through all the previous ones and put the LPP designation on it. I know it may be a lot, but I think it's something that needs to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Through you, Mr. Chairman. This particular case gave us a bit of a challenge because of the age. So this was a development that was done, I think, about 30 years before the complaint ever came to us. And it came to us as a result of the owner of the land. I think the original owner of the land had deceased. Brent can correct me if I'm wrong. And it was his son and the original landowner's grandson who brought the matter to our attention. They thought the land was always theirs. And so they applied for planning approval to have I think it was one of the little food trucks parked on the land. It was on the beach in South Sound, so it was nice little ambiance. And they found out that they didn't own the land after all when their planning permission was turned down. And so this was a case where, because of the lapse of time, there were no records, and the Lands and Survey Department had a record saying that this was the LPP, but it was penciled in, so we didn't consider it to be official. We also had a problem with the fact that because 30 years had gone by, if you were intending to then earmark this parcel as LPP, good administration would have required that you get in touch with the landowner to say, by the way, we are earmarking this as LPP. So they were completely caught off guard, and we felt that Lands and Survey could have done a better job of better public service in letting the individual know that their parcel had been was subject to this LPP. I'll let Brent speak to what has transpired, because originally our recommendation was challenged. We went back and reheard, sat with the representatives from planning and Lands and Survey, and there were issues with the process again, because we recommended that they go back to a tribunal, but there was no tribunal. And I'll let Brent speak to the rest of it, because I hope his memory is better than mine about it.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I think the outcome of this will again be gone over in the 2024 report, but the outcome was one of these cases where the Ombudsman made the initial recommendations, and the department and the ministry had to come to us and say, wait a minute, we can't do this, recommendations 1 and 2, because of the law, without too much detail of it. So we had to go back and negotiate with them and speak with them about what could be done. And I think what could be done in this case was done, but we couldn't follow through with the initial recommendations made by the Ombudsman.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Ebanks.
Mr. Chair, I'm actually glad that the member for Bottom West brought this up. Actually, my first meeting this morning at 9 o'clock was actually dealing with a LPP. And it was an LPP that was in the Cayman Brac. The only thing difference with the LPP and the Cayman Brac is that the Cayman Brac doesn't have any zoning laws. So at the time, the person didn't have to.
You're saying the Cayman Brac laws are different from Grand Cayman laws?
Something like that, sir, in some ways. But because it doesn't have zoning laws there, it didn't describe that someone had to put a property as LPP. So it's a little bit easier to be fixed. But I know the government has been doing some wonderful work along with the Acting Chief Officer, Mr. Wilbur Welcome, contacting a lot of these individuals that we have found, and they have been transferring the properties back into Crown. But I think one of the things that we need to do with the law is just correct the law that once people are getting these subdivisions approved, automatically that piece of parcel goes into the Crown name instead of staying into the developer's name. That way we won't have this problem going forward in the future. I think that's probably the most easiest and most logical way to do it, because majority of the developers now don't actually do anything with the property, and then usually people will come to the Crown then and ask them if they can put a park into it or do something with it. So it's always falling back on the Crown. So we've actually started some legislation work, but because of the end of the time right now, it will be brought forward by the new government. But this is something we should have fixed in the first part of the new year of the next government coming in, actually.
Thank you. And it'd also be remiss of me not to mention, because some of the things we're discussing here is that we hope that the Independent Review Committee, which consists of 3 local attorneys, an overseas UK ombudsman, and the office here, to go over, to review what the ombudsman's office, what they work on, a complete review of everything to see how we can make sure we're up to date, following the laws, and doing everything the correct way. So I'm sure the oversight committee, the next committee, will be very pleased when the independent review committee, who will continue to work to hand over what information you all have worked together as well. But I would also like to say, can you explain to us or tell us how the training, because we do know that this word about, I can't think of the word right, there's a word that they love to use, succession planning, as one former chief officer who's not with us anymore said, is only on paper. But I would like to know what is the Ombudsman Office been doing in the area of training, and what certification or certificates have been obtained or whatever. Take your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a topic that I'm really happy to speak about, because training is very important to our organization. I can tell you that most of our staff have at least a first degree. Some have postgraduate degrees. Some have decades of experience that's relevant to the work that we do, which I think is equivalent to a degree. And as you know, learning is a lifelong process, and I'm happy to say that that is the culture at our office. It is something that I feel very strongly about, because obviously my term is for 7 years. If you follow the Ombudsman Act, if you follow the PSMA, it's going to be 1.5 years when I reach retirement age. So I took my post knowing that I was never going to be there forever, and that I always wanted to ensure that a Caymanian succeeded me as Ombudsman. And so I think most of our staff here can attest to the fact that I've been very passionate about our staff getting the professional development that they need, so that any one of them can rise to that challenge to ultimately become my successor. And so that's been my goal. Unfortunately, during 2023, which happened to be our busiest year in terms of workload, it was, as you said, as you alluded to, Mr. Saunders, disrupted by external forces that really hampered the work that we were doing. It also hampered our training. It hampered our succession planning, because when I inherited the role, or not inherited, I was by a competitive process appointed to the post of Ombudsman. It consisted of silos. So in our 5 practice areas, we had 5 silos. So we had staff that did FOI only, data protection only, police complaints only, malad only, whistleblower only. And I said, how on earth does anybody ever get to be the Ombudsman if you are pigeonholed into one specific area? So it was my goal to tear down the silos and have everybody on the information rights team learn everything about information rights. Same on the complaints, tear down the silos, let everybody learn everything about complaints. And then, for anybody who's overly ambitious, you could cross-train across divisions. Well, I was hampered in that effort because there were internal forces that were working against change. So I'm happy to say that's behind us. I really feel that we are going to make progress now in moving forward, because we've gotten through that period successfully. It was very challenging, I will say. So I appreciate you recognizing that, Mr. Saunders. But I'm happy to say that we have just recently appointed our Deputy for Information Rights. So we welcome her joining the team. I had been wearing that deputy hat. I had been wearing the Deputy of Complaints hat as well, simultaneously with the Ombudsman hat a lot of times since my appointment. So, and then we have Ms. Enya Parchment, who has also just recently joined us on the Information Rights team. Prior to their appointment, we had Ms. Kathy Gonzalez join us on the Complaints team. And so we also recruited 2 more people to join our complaints team in March. So we will finally be up to strength. We'll be back to our staff complement of 17 instead of being 8 or 10 or 12 for part of this journey. And I'm very happy to say that in being able to fully staff the office, we'll be able to do even more good work. But in terms of training, going back to that point, gosh, particularly on the information rights side, because data protection is always evolving, we make it our business for our team there to get as many certifications as they can in any area that's relevant to the information rights. So in freedom of information or data protection, even going into AI and cybersecurity, because that also features into our work. How much time do I have? Because I have a whole list of our training, but I want to just say that it is a huge part of my passion, because I think our work is only going to be a reflection of who we are as individuals, and if we don't equip our staff to be the best that they can be, then our work will reflect that. So I'm very happy to say that we have an ambitious group who are motivated to train, to professionally develop themselves. We have some with master's degrees, some are pursuing master's degrees, some are pursuing relevant certifications, the government ILM courses. What else? Anybody want to jump in and help me with law degrees? We have 5 persons, I think, on staff with law degrees currently. So it's something that I take very seriously because, Mr. Chairman, you've known me a long time. You know where my heart is. And I'm a Caymanian, born and bred. If I can do the job, why should not someone else? So I am very motivated to ensure that our succession plan reflects my goal of having my successor be a Caymanian. And all along, that is going to be what I continue to do, is just training staff and giving them the opportunities that they need and want to professionally develop, and make sure that they're equipped, because whoever is the oversight committee at the end of my tenure, I want to be able to say proudly that I'm handing over the reins to a Caymanian who I know confidently can do the job.
Thank you very much. Mr. Saunders?
No, I think once you survive former Governor Roper, you can survive anything. And I'm going to say this much, the people have one view, and I wish the people who dealt with him and know what he was really like would have the courage to speak up and tell people basically that he met this island no good, contrary to the smiles and everything else. But you won't say it, but I will say it. And that's fine. But for me as a politician to have dealt with him and, like I said, stand my ground and know what that is like. And I can only imagine what you, being a public servant, what you would have endured. I mean, for me, it's, water off a duck's back kind of thing, and he's gone, and I'm still here. My last question, Ms. Sharon, is on page 79, which is kind of close off what it was that I wanted to what we just started on, which was going back again to monitoring the access to CBC's database. I noticed that part of the recommendation was there was a whistleblower. I didn't want to get too much into the whistleblower section of this, but basically having CBC put in the systems in place that can log in who is accessing people's personal information, because they do hold a lot of people personal information. I mean, they have just about information on every work permit holder, and they also do have a lot of Caymanians, travel history and so forth. And like I said, who's going up on what plane and what and this and that, and people being quite sometimes mischievous. So in terms of that signature where they can go in to check to see who accessed what, was that something that they, did they get, is there an update on that?
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this was, like you say, it's a whistleblower case, so we had to be very careful, but it came out as small, and sometimes as hard as you try to protect the individual. I think this was a case where, and again, Mr. Fuller was involved in this one. I think this was a case where someone was not using the system appropriately, and there was no way to track, there was no footprint to track who was logged into the system, so there was no way to find out who the person abusing the system was. To the best of my recollection, our recommendations were complied with. Am I correct? So The problem that CBC had, and I will say kudos to them because they were very, very cooperative in our investigation. The problem with the tracking in their system was related to budgetary constraints. So they had the software, but they couldn't afford it, so it was never implemented. But thankfully, it had been something that they had considered, they just didn't have the budget for. So when we made the recommendation that, that they had to be able to trace whoever was logged on to the system and for what purpose they were logged on, they accepted our recommendation, and they worked very tirelessly, I would say, to ensure that they got the budget, the funding for it, and the software, and it was implemented along with all of the other recommendations. So it took a bit longer, but again, they were relying on other entities to assist with the funding, but at the end, they did comply with all of our recommendations. So that's a success story.
Thank you very much, and I just want to give kudos to Mr. Wesley Orwell. I worked with him. He's very good like that, but that was one of the things I remember in a previous life having to deal with, where people up there just mashing up other people's relationships with this kind of information. Outside of that, the other questions I had was really police related, but I don't want to go into that. We already recognize that there are shortcomings already, so it makes no use we go through and highlight all the different issues. But what I would say to the public, that it is a comprehensive report. Read it, the examples, the specific cases that were used, and the resolution. It relates to a lot of people that live here, and I would tell people go and look at it. It's funny because on my way in, I was actually speaking to our MP from another Caribbean island, and I told him, he had called me about something, and I called him back, and I told him I was on my way down for a meeting in Parliament. And he said, Chris, I thought you guys finished because, we caught your final speech and everything. I said, no, it's actually an Ombudsman Committee meeting, and it's the first time I've done it publicly. And his response to me was, you guys still got Ombudsman in Cayman? Like, you all still doing that? Just like, so we take it for granted, but I can tell you for other Caribbean islands, they're like, really? But so I just really want to say to the people of the Cayman Islands that, listen, the Constitution is there. It has established this office. Please use it. And part of having this public meeting was to highlight and to let them know that, listen, there is an avenue for you to go and make a legitimate complaint. You don't need to go on social media and just bash people and vent and nothing. It doesn't fix the system. It doesn't fix the problem. Use the resources that are there. I mean, we spend good money, over $1 million and change a year to have this department. Let the public use it, and that's one of the things that we wanted the public to know by having this hearing. So I want to thank you and your team for the wonderful job that you have done, and again, with all of the different pressures and everything that you had to endure and bear to maintain your independence. So well done to you.
Jay Banks, you have anything else?
Mr. Chair, just through you, the last time that we had our meeting, we've gotten an update on your office. I think there was some work that was being done over there. Just want to find out that works have been completed and it's up to satisfaction now. Where are we at with that?
Thank you. First of all, do you mind if I just acknowledge Mr. Saunders' kind words? Thank you very much for those kind words, and I agree that and appreciate this opportunity of being able to publicly show the work of this office and to encourage more people to use us. I know that I'm inviting more work for my team and me, but this is what we signed up to do, to serve the public, and so we do hope that this has been beneficial to those who may not be aware of our work and what we do. And now, Minister Eubanks, to your point, I think that is a matter that we are going to discuss in the administrative part of this meeting, because it is kind of twofold. Some of the remediation work that was carried out was to address mold in the building, and that remediation work did take place, but we believe it was kind of a temporary fix, and so it's not ideal, and staff continue to have respiratory illnesses. And so it's something that I obviously, as the team leader, am very concerned about, because I need my team healthy. And so I think if you don't mind, if we can discuss that in more detail at the admin meeting, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I just want to thank the Ombudsman and all their team for all of the hard work they have been doing. It's been a wonderful I would say almost full 4 years working with you. I've seen some of the hard works. I've heard it. It's unfortunately that a lot of people couldn't see some of our first meetings that we've had in the back, and how passionate you are about getting with the job that you do, and your team and how they work, and seeing everything that you guys do behind the scenes is starting to come in front now, and people can actually basically see and hear what you guys really do, because you don't get the efforts that you guys really deserve. I think a lot of people don't recognize you, and a lot of people don't use the team, but as we're seeing now, the numbers are growing. So I just want to thank you all for all the hard work that you continue to doing, and please continue, because you are an asset to the island.
Thank you, Mr. Eubanks. I received a message. Do civil servants have any recourse through the Ombudsman's office?
Civil service in terms of?
People who work in government.
But like personnel related, you mean, or?
Yes.
The short answer is no.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind,
Please
and
do,
since
go.
we're in Parliament, I would like to highlight the fact, since our office is charged with fairness, and because the United Nations Human Rights Commission relies on the offices of ombudsman, the ombudsman regime around the world to ensure justice for everyone. I would just like to say here on this floor that because of the legislation under the Complaints Maladministration Act, we are precluded from investigating personnel-related matters. Now, you may argue that there is the Civil Service Appeals Commission for that, but
yeah, we learned a lesson through Sheena Eubanks' case about that, but continue.
So the prohibition there is that a civil servant can only appeal a decision that is made. So if a decision hasn't been made, so let's say someone makes a bullying complaint, but it's not going anywhere, they can't appeal that decision because no decision has been made. They can't appeal to, or they can't make a complaint to us for maladministration, which is what it would amount to, because our schedule to our act says that we can't investigate personnel-related matters. And I mean, it is so broad, it means inaction, action, it just ties our hands. So for a civil servant that can't go to CSAC and can't come to the ombudsman, their only recourse is the courts, which is, time costs and monetary costs usually make it prohibitive. So we have a large demographic that are without recourse, and that is a violation of a human right. And it's a very big concern that I have. But our law does not allow us to investigate those kinds of complaints.
Madam Ombudsman, you and your office, you and your team, as the chairman, it's been an honor. And I do look forward to continue to hear the great reports that I hear from the public, that they felt that they have been handled fairly, and that's all people can ask. This day and age where the poor man feels that he stands no chance in court because he doesn't have money to afford a big lawyer, and some of the lawyers that are on the list to get help, when you hear people referring to them as Mr. Guilty, that's what lawyers are being called, because they're just telling the clients, plead guilty. Even when they know they're innocent, they got witnesses and so forth, just to get the case over, collect some money and move on. These are the things that the public complain to us about. And when you hear, on the other hand, that if they go to the ombudsman's office, they feel they're being treated fairly. A lot of the little people feel there's no natural justice in this country. They feel that the courts, whether it's on purpose or not, allow the prosecution to drag on cases for a year, 2 years. Their life is in limbo, and they get no recourse. Where they get the money from, people have had to sell land because they refused to plead guilty or to roll over and play dead. On principle, they sell the only thing they have so they can continue to fight cases where they're at the end is thrown out or they're found not guilty. Then they've lost everything already. And to hear people talk to the Ombudsman's office, the job you guys are doing in being fair, and that's the word I've heard quite a few people use, they were fair. Thank you all so much. The country is blessed to have you and your staff. And from the very beginning, you told me, I want to train our Caymanians that when you look through this office, we don't have to send overseas for anyone. And to see where you're heading with that, thank you, and respect is due. Thank you all very much. And to the members who sat here for 4 years, Mr. Saunders, go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I recognize that this is actually your last term, and I want to go on record to publicly thank you for the passion that you brought to the Ombudsman Committee. I know you've been, I think from 2017, you've been chairing this committee, and since I've been elected, you have been chairing of this committee, and you have brought a lot of passion and a lot of vigor in fighting for Caymanians. And it has never been lost on me as a former Minister of Immigration or responsible for immigration when we were taking a hardline position and members of my own team were beginning to bend and break. You never wavered in that support of fighting for Caymanians. And you know, as I'm preparing my own manifesto and seeing the results of what we did in terms of one of the lowest unemployment rate in like over 20, 2 decades that we had, by taking a hardline stand, it could not have been done without you. And I just want to say to you from the bottom of my heart, since I won't be able to come and campaign for you to tell the people what you did in that regard, I want to go on record to publicly thank you for standing up and fighting for Caymanians. It's sometimes a very lonely position to be in with a lot of the special interest groups, but you have held to your ground of not for sale and not for rent. And I just want you to know, not just as a fellow MP, but as a brother and a friend, I want to thank you. You, Bernie Alfredo Bush, for fighting for Caymanians. And this country have lost a strong Caymanian voice when you chose not to stand for election, but I do understand why. Your health comes first and everything else, but I want to thank you for that, bro. I want to thank you.
Thank you. And there's people like the Ombudsman that also, when I see where they want to go, it's the same direction I want to go, where I think our country should go, because at the end of the day, it says the Cayman Islands. It doesn't say the UK, it doesn't say Canada, it doesn't say Jamaica, Honduras, Norway. It's the Cayman Islands. And it should be about Caymanians, whether you came by peen or by plane. If you have it by plane, now you're one of us. We have to accept that. So thank you all to this office. Thank you all for everything you're doing. Continue to make our people feel that they have some place that is being treated fairly. Thank you all very much. Tishelle, thanks for everything.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you just allow me to also extend my thanks to you as the chair of this committee and to the honorable members of this committee. It has been a real pleasure to serve with you. I feel like, because I had, okay, good. I hope you have us under your remit. So I have had another oversight committee, and but you are the first committee that I feel really got it. You really understood what Ombudsman was about, and you championed our cause, and I am very grateful for that. I always feel like you have had our backs and will continue to do so, Mr. Saunders and Honorable Mr. Eubanks. And just want to wish you all the very best, Mr. Bernie. I appreciate your passion and your just tenacity in getting things done for this office. And I would also like to thank you for having this public forum, which gives us an opportunity to reach a much wider group of people than we could have ever done on our own. And so thank you very much for the privilege of being here today. And my best wishes to you all.
Thank you. Any other business? That's it. Thank you all very much. The meeting is adjourned now.